Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Kigabine with the Garland County Library in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and I'm here tonight to introduce Karlus Trapp, who is about to present his program, The Roots of Black Music in America. Karlus describes tonight's program as a 100-year journey back through time to hear, experience anew, and learn about the music of America's Black musical giants like Diana Ross and the Supremes, Stevie Wonder, Chuck Berry, and many more. According to the bio you can find on his website at karlustrappmusic.com, Mr. Trapp started playing guitar at the age of 11, teaching himself how to play by listening to the music of the Beatles and Motown. And his love for the guitar playing of Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton led him to discover the blues of Albert and B.B. King and the swamp-drenched New Orleans rhythm and blues of Dr. John. So before we begin, as always, I want to welcome everyone watching, and if you have any questions or comments, you're welcome to post them live. So with all that said, I'm going to turn it over to the presentation. So Karlus, live from New York, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Paul. Glad I could be here tonight. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this musical journey of discovery and celebration. The musical history of America is rich. As rich as the son of a Rockefeller, and as deep as the oceans that bound her shores. But there aren't many peoples whose lives and music has touched so many, have been created in the midst of such inequality, prejudice, and laws meant to keep those people down. Through it all, African American people have made a legacy, a musical legacy, without which we know the world would be a much sadder and less funky place. So if you are ready to discover, have some fun with the roots of Black music in America, let's get started. To do that, we have to head down south. Not down south today, we have to head back to the 1800s. Down plantation country in America. Down to Mississippi, Alabama. We're gonna hear those songs. We're gonna start out hearing those songs of the African slaves, the Negro spirituals. And I can see a plantation out there. Slaves working in that field, man, it looks hot, hard. That mansion looks like, whoa. But we want to hear those slave songs. You can hear some call and response out there, but we want to hear those Negro spirituals. So we got to find those slaves that aren't working, just singing this tune. I hear them. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children. Wade in the water, God's no trouble with water. We wade in the water, wade in the water, children. Wade in the water, yeah, got no trouble with water. Who's that walking there, dressed in red? God's no trouble. Must be the children that Moses led. Got no trouble with water. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. Got no trouble with didn't always know what this song was about. But the song is not about an afternoon swim to relieve yourself from the blazing southern heat. It's a song about running away to freedom. Hope to hook up with that underground railroad. You are a runaway slave. You are an outlaw. Slave master's hounds are on your trail. You're thrown off that trail. The slaves, runaways, they find a body of water, a pond, a stream, a river. That's where they make their way north, waiting, waiting, waiting in the water, waiting in the water, children, waiting in the water. God from trouble, water, God from trouble, water. Now when those slaves feel that it's safe enough to hook up with that underground railroad, they throw those dogs off the trail. Well, I saw on that song, it's about hooking up with those chariots. That's what they call them. Sing along if you know it. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming from to carry me home. Swing low, a sweet chariot, I come along to carry me home. I looked over Jordan, what did I see? Coming along to carry me home. The band of angels coming after me, coming along to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming along to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. First two songs, 1850s, start of a 100-year journey of discovery. Having those slaves, after they hooked up with that underground railroad, made their way to freedom, started to form communities of their own based around the churches, praise churches. The songs, the music started to have a little different bounce to it. They didn't want to sing those spirituals anymore. They were done with those. So you hear songs like this one. When the saints go marching in, when the saints go marching in, oh how I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in, when that sun used to shine, when that sun used to shine, oh how I want to be in that number. When that sun refused to shine, on that hallelujah day, on that hallelujah day, oh how I want to be in that number. On that hallelujah day, when those saints go marching in, when those saints go marching in, oh how I want to be in that number. When those saints go marching, did it Song for the free blacks up north, out west. All right. So we started out in the 1850s with the Negro spirituals. Now, second, we hooked up with the songs from the praise churches. Praise tunes like that one from that one. So a song that is associated with the city of New Orleans. And New Orleans will be coming up, but that's around the 1880s, heading to the 1890s, the praise churches. And in the 1890s, in America, out west, there was music being created, a piano-based music that was part classical and part Wild West barroom saloon piano music. They did a mashup and they called it ragtime music. In Sedalia, Missouri, the king of ragtime lived in Sedalia, Missouri. And that's where he started to make his name. His name was Scott Joplin. Well, the king of ragtime music. He didn't invent ragtime music, but he wrote more ragtime songs than anyone else. And he was a student of classical pianists like Chopin, Beethoven, and Mozart. But he was creating an American style of music for Americans by an American black man. And we're going to head out to Missouri so we can visit Mr. Scott Joplin. Stay there, don't move. Now, in doing this show, I found out that this tune that I'm about to perform for you is played on ice cream trucks all around the country. I thought, well, maybe it was just the Northeast, but no. All around the country, when the ice cream truck comes around in the summertime, you hear this song by Mr. Scott Joplin, The Entertainer. There we go. All right. Entertainer for Mr. Scott Joplin. ragtime music, played a little raggedy by me today. Thank you, Mr. Joplin. Ice cream truck music. Now, Scott Joplin started to become known around the 1890s. That song was recorded. You can hear Scott Joplin actually playing that song around 1900 because he recorded it on piano rolls. It's a wonderful thing. Now, Scott Joplin was a big influence on the next icon in our show. And this man is one of those unknowns in American music. His music is not unknown, but he is unknown. And he wrote this song that affected the world in the 1920s. He wrote it when he was a teenager, way before the 1920s. But in 1923, the song got published and the world started to lose its mind to the Charleston. So we're gonna head to New York City, because that's where he was playing piano on the weekends. And we're gonna look for a speakeasy so we can just drop in and hear Mr. James B. Johnson walking down the streets of New York, 1922, 23. And I think I can hear some music coming from a building up the street. People are hanging out outside. I said, yeah, come on in. The music's great, come on down, we'll see you inside. We open the door, head down this long, dark stairway. The closer we get to the bottom, the louder the music gets. We can hear this place is jumping. We get to the bottom, we can hardly see the door. We knock on the door. The man inside opens up a peephole. He looks at us, we look at him. Next thing we know, he opens it up, and we are dancing the Charleston. This room is packed with people, working people. So I ask a working stiff next to me, I say, who is that on the piano over there? And we see it's a black teenage boy, at least he looks like a teenager, playing the daylights out of the piano. And he says, oh, that's James B. Johnson. I said, James B. Johnson? Yes, he wrote this song, the Charleston. Oh, I said, well, who are you? He says, well, we're all longshoremen, and we come up here from Charleston, South Carolina, just to hear James play this song that he named after our town, Charleston, South Carolina. And the world lost its mind. The roaring 20s. Mr. James B. Johnson, one of those unknown, unsung musical geniuses in the musical history of the world. Now, the next star of our show is definitely not unknown. In fact, he became one of the most recognizable names and faces in music history of the world. He was born in the city of New Orleans in 1901. on the 4th of July. And his name, Louis Armstrong. So Louis Armstrong, around, since we're in the 1920s here, 1929, Louis and his group would have been playing in a club, maybe in Chicago. And Louis Armstrong helped to change the sound of American music. We're going to show you how by playing a song, an American song, how it sounded before Louis Armstrong, how it sounded after Louis Armstrong got a hold of it. Trumpet player, band leader, singer, everybody wanted to sound like Louis after he came around, even the women. So here's an American tune before Louis Armstrong called Jeepers Creepers. Jeepers Creepers, how'd you get those peepers? Jeepers Creepers, how'd you get those eyes? Gosh, oh, yeah, go. How'd you get so little? Gosh, oh, yeah, go. How'd you get that size? Then Louis Armstrong, son of New Orleans, came along and our music started to swing like this. Jibbers, jibbers, oh, how'd you get them jibbers, jibbers, oh, I said no, how'd you get them eyes, guns, oh, giggle now, tell me how'd you get so little, oh, I said giggle, I know not how'd you get that size. Oh, how'd you get them peepers? I said, no, how'd you get them eyes? How'd you get them eyes? Oh, how'd you get that size? Mr. Louis Armstrong entertaining in a club with his hot five. 1929, 1930. Now, in the 1930s, you could hear Louis Armstrong and his band doing their thing in the cities, but if you headed down south, down to the Delta, back down to Mississippi where we started out in the 1930s, you could hear some Delta blues, like we're going to hear from King of the Delta Blues, Mr. Robert Johnson. Gonna come in my kitchen, 'cause it's gonna be raining outside. I'm gonna get up in the morning, leave out dust my room. I'm gonna get up in the morning, leave out dust my room. Tell him that man you been loving now, walking at my room. I'm gonna call up China, see my girlfriend's over there. I'm gonna call up China, see if my girlfriend's over there. My girlfriend ain't down in the Philippines, must be in Monroe somewhere. Robert Johnson. Eric Clapton said, when I first heard Robert Johnson, it changed my life. Robert Johnson, when he first came on the scene down there in Mississippi, he said he sounded so raw, unpolished. They told him, go home, boy, learn how to play, then come back. Robert Johnson went away. Legend has it that he didn't only leave to go practice, he went out, make a deal with the devil. Deal with the devil to sell his soul. He said he went down to the crossroads, out to the crossroads. Made that deal, sell his soul so he could become the greatest blues man alive. So they didn't see Robert Johnson for quite some time. Finally, he came back on the scene. They said, oh, there's Robert. Where's he been? We'll put up with him. Robert Johnson started to play. Started to rip it up. I said, what happened to him? That ain't the Robert Johnson we know. No, the Robert Johnson that they heard was the man who changed Eric Clapton's life. Was it the devil? Was it just practicing? We don't know, but we do know that Robert Johnson never lived to see the light of day of his 28th birthday. So be careful who you make your deals with. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So while you are hearing Delta Blues down south, if you head up north to the cities, in the 30s, towards the 40s, big band swing is the thing. Like the Duke Ellington Band, and then on to New York City. Ba-dum, 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 ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. Big band swing. 30s, 40s, bands like the Duke Ellington Band. This is an original composition, Take the A Train. The Count Basie Band, Tommy Dorsey Band. These bands tended to have lovely women singers up front. Singers like Billie Holiday, Lena Horne, and Ella Fitzgerald. Those singers, they love to sing songs by the professional Tin Pan Alley songwriters who worked out of New York City. Guys like the Gershwin brothers and Harold Arlen. So we're gonna do a Harold Arlen song, and we're gonna put Ella Fitzgerald with Count Basie Band, Philadelphia, 1937. Yeah. My apologies to all you Ella Fitzgerald fans out there. One of my favorite songs that here called Blues in the Night. My mama didn't tell me when I was in pigtails. My mama didn't tell me, child. Oh, a man gonna speak talk. a big eye, girl in a sweet town's done. Oh, man, is it to a face? Oh, it's something if you just sing blues in the night. Now the rain is falling, now the train is falling away. My mama done told me that lonesome whistle blowing close the trestle away. Away. My mama done told me clickety clack, echoing back blues in the night. 1937, Count Basie Band in Philadelphia, the height of the swing era. Ella Fitzgerald up front singing that song by Mr. Harold Arlen, Tin Pan Alley songwriter, Jewish American songwriter, who wrote songs that the black and brown singers loved to sing. He loved to write for them. It was an incredible bond. And that incredible bond between the Jewish American songwriters and the African American singers is one of those unsung stories in the roots of black music in America. But Mr. Harold Arlen is best known for writing the music to a movie that came out in 1939. That song, well, is one of the songs from that movie. And I think you will know what movie it is when I sing this tune for you. I would not be just a nothing, my head all full of stuffing, my heart all full of pain. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. I would dance and be merry, life would be a ding-a-dairy if I only had a brain. Yes, Mr. Harold Arlen, known for writing the music to the movie The Wizard of Oz. In 1943, there was a movie released in America where all the actors, all the singers, all the dancers, all the musicians, everybody on the screen was an African American star. The movie was called Stormy Weather, and it had some of America's biggest musical stars of the day. And this is 1943. Stars like Miss Lena Horne. Piano, the stride piano giant, Mr. Fats Waller, who learned how to play by studying with James P. Johnson, who wrote the Charleston. James P. Johnson learned to play piano by teaching himself the rags of Scott Joplin. I love that lineage there. In this movie, Stormy Weather, there was a band leader, part ringmaster, singer, who took the style of call and response, wrapped around his flamboyant style and personality, and made an iconic anthem for the swing era. His name was Cab Calloway. This song is called Minnie the Moocher. The song is the epitome of call and response, that style of singing that slaves used to get through their day. Folks, there's a story about Minnie the Moocher. She was a red-hot boochie coocher. She was the roughest, toughest brand. Minnie had a heart, I did it so well. Honey, 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 honey. Whoa. Hey. She messed around with a bloke and Smokey. She loved him though he was cooking. He took her down to Chinatown. I showed her how to kick the dime around. Honey, 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 honey. Whoa. Hey. Benny the Moocher, the Mr. Calloway. One of the stars of the movie Stormy Weather, released in 1943. If you get a chance, find that movie, make yourself a big bowl of popcorn, sit back and enjoy. So swing was a thing up until the late 40s. And then swing started to wane. And where one music wanes, another comes along to take its place. And what came along was a style of music called jump blues. The bands were smaller, music heavy on the shouted call and response, and the songs, like many of the Moocher, were comedic takes on black urban living. Songs like Is You Is or Is You Ain't My Baby. And this one from Mr. Louis Jordan. Walking with my baby to this beat, long and lean and enough to eat. She my baby, love her just the same. Talking about my baby, California is her name. Oh, California, what makes her big and so hard? I love her just the same. Oh, crazy about my baby, California is her name. Oh, California, what makes her big and so hard? Jump blues had a tremendous influence on this next star of our show, who grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, a middle-class family, picked up the guitar at the age of 10, taught himself how to play, grew up to become one of the world's greatest rock and roll songwriters, singers, an icon, writing songs like Johnny Be Good, C'est La Vie, You Never Can Tell. Turn right handsome man, I'm talking about Mr. Chuck Berry, the father of rock and roll guitar. Everybody from the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, to Jimi Hendrix, all influenced by Mr. Chuck Berry. And I gotta pick up the electric guitar to do this one justice. The wonderful thing about all of these stars of this show, when you hear their music, it is so vibrant, it sounds like they just recorded it yesterday. I wanna write a little letter on a mail to my lover today. It's a writing a little record I want my child today. Roll over Beethoven, I hit it again today. You know my temperature rise and the jukebox is gonna fuse. You know my heart keep the rhythm, the soul singing the blues. Roll over Beethoven, I tell you I'm still the news. Roll over Beethoven, 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 ding 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 blue. Roll over Beethoven, the king of rock and roll, guitar and songwriting, Mr. Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry brings us 100 years from where we started. We started in the 1850s with the Negro spirituals. And here we are in the middle of the 1950s with rock and roll, taking over from jump blues. Now, Elvis was happening. And Chuck Berry was happening, Fats Domino was happening, Jerry Lee Lewis was happening, doo-wop was happening. But that will be another show. But there was a piano player, singer, band leader who emerged in the 1950s. Started out as a jazz pianist, styling himself after Mr. Nat King Cole. But he had a voice like no other. Stopped people in their tracks. And he and his band, they played blues, they played jazz, they played rumba, they played rock and roll. They even had a country hit in the 1960s. And I am talking about Mr. Ray Charles, the man they called the genius. He just said, call me Brother Ray. Ray Charles grew up extremely poor in Georgia, but would grow up and lost his sight at 7 years old, but would grow up to become one of the people that I would put on the Mount Rushmore of American music. I'm going to go back to the piano and play one of my favorite songs by Mr. Ray Charles. One of my Ray Bans here. genius, Mr. Ray Charles, rocking us into the 60s. Yeah. So like Mr. Ray Charles, our next star started out in the 50s, took his influential songs and his career into the 60s, where he became a civil rights activist. But first, our star, Mr. Harry Belafonte, was 9 years old when his family moved from moved from New York City to Jamaica. We don't know why. Maybe they got tired of the New York winters. But whatever the reason, we are grateful because the sounds of the islands, particularly calypso, became the defining influence on the sound of Mr. Harry Belafonte. They call the king of calypso, bringing that sound to American music. Icons like Jamaica Farewell, Man Smart, Woman Smarter, and this anthem, which you can hear in baseball stadiums all over America almost every day. And this may be your one chance to sing along with this tune today. So I would take advantage of the opportunity here, even though I can't hear you. And we sang, Deo, Deo, daylight come and me want go home. Day, it's a 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 day. Daylight come and me want go home. I work all night on a drink of rum. Daylight come and me want go home. I pick banana till the morning come. Daylight come and me want go home. They come Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come and me want go home. Come Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come and we want go home. A 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot bunch. Daylight come and we want go home. A 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot bunch. Daylight come and we want go home. Day is a day, oh. Daylight come and we want go home. Day is a day, is a day, is a daylight come and we want go home. This song is a joyous feeling that draws the people, but this is a song, a hard day's night working song. Could be the songs of the slaves. A beautiful bunch of ripe bananas. Daylight come and me want go home. I have a deadly black tarantula. Daylight come and me want go home. I said, Deo, Deo. Daylight come and me want go home. Day, this a 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 day. Daylight come and me want go home. 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 The Banana Boat Song from Mr. Harry Belafonte, who became a civil rights activist, marching with Mr. Martin Luther King on his famous marches. Harry Belafonte turned 94 about 3 weeks ago. God bless you, Harry. Still looking good. Our next star was a young teenage gospel sensation down south. His family moved up to Chicago, and those aspirations changed. Gospel music, I guess, didn't make it anymore. Mr. Sam Cooke. He was an incredible songwriter, writing songs like Cupid and What a Wonderful World This Could Be, Another Saturday Night. Mr. Sam Cooke had an incredible tenor voice that would inspire songwriters, singers like Rod Stewart and Steve Perry, who worshipped at the temple of Sam Cooke. He became the first African-American songwriter to own his own publishing. Started his own record label, but left us all too soon, tragically, in 1964. I'm going to sing a song of his that has social conscience. Change, yeah. Ha! 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 Don't you know that's the sound of a man working on the chain gang? That's the sound of a man working on the chain gang. All day long they work so hard till the sun is going down. Working on the highways and byways, they're in the crowd. Yet the moment their lives away, there you hear somebody say, that's the sound of a man working on the chain gang. That's the sound of a man working on the chain gang. Ha! 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 That's the sound of a man working on the chain gang. That's the sound of the man working on the chain gang. Sam Cooke bringing us in to the 1960s. 1960s, a time for music in the world maybe unlike anything we will ever see again. I liken it to, in classical music, there was the 1700s, and in jazz music, there was the 1930s. In popular music, it was the 1960s. English bands were invading the US en masse, led by the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And they were doing a lot of rhythm and blues and soul music, written and or performed by American groups. Now, we had our own sound. Out west, we had a West Coast sound. We had an East Coast sound. We had a Memphis sound, a New Orleans sound. But in Detroit, Michigan, we had a Motown sound, led by Mr. Berry Gordy, who took unknown teenagers from the suburbs and the ghettos of Detroit and made them international pop stars. Stars like the Super supremes. Stop in the name of love before you break my heart and get over. Baby, I'm aware you know. Each time you leave my town, see you walk down the street, knowing you love you need. Stand before you run to her, leaving me alone and hurt. Get over, get over. Supremes and temptations. I've got sunshine on a cloudy day, and when it's cold outside, I've got the month of May. Well, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, talking about my girl, my girl. Motown. The Motown story is one of America's greatest musical and business achievements. At their pinnacle, in the top 10 songs in the world, 3 of them often were Motown singles. Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, the Temps, the Four Tops, Stevie Wonder, the Jackson 5. They turned out hits like the Motor City turned out cars. Thank you, Mr. Berry Gordy. But in Detroit, there must have been something in the water. Because on the other side of Detroit, come on now, we're done with that. On the other side of Detroit, there was a young girl who started singing with her dad's gospel group when she was 12 years old. She would become, this girl would grab a hold of Otis Redding's, soul legend Otis Redding's song, Respect, and make it her own. She took this song in 1967, had a meteoric rise, and Aretha Franklin never looked back. And we're gonna do little Aretha Franklin right here for you. I'm gonna need your help with this. I'm a little hoarse right now, so I'm gonna need your help with this one. From the city of Detroit. What you want, baby, I got. What you need, you know I got it. All I'm asking for the respect to come on. When you come on, just live it, baby. Ain't gonna do you wrong, where you going? Ain't gonna do you wrong, I'm coming. All I'm asking to come in, give me some breeze. Oh now, baby, when you come home, just live it, baby. R.S.P. City, know not what it means to me. R.S.P. City, take care, TCB. Aretha Franklin, first woman elected to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Aretha left the building a few years ago. Eternally grateful for the music that she has left us with. Thank you, Aretha. Be respect. I hope you have enjoyed this journey, celebration, the roots of black music in America. We have one more musical star A man whose unmistakable funky sound, his unmistakable voice, unlike no other, like a soul voice scraped with sandpaper. His songs, which were more like chants than they were songs, and that incredible dancing that would inspire singer-dancers like Prince and Michael Jackson to carry the torch for Mr. James Brown into the 80s and 90s. So this last song really expresses how I feel right now, and I love it because he's got that word "feel" in there. And Mr. James Brown is going to do a song called "I Feel Good." I feel good. I knew that I would. I feel good. I knew that I would. Oh, so good, so good. I got you. I feel nice. I sugar and spice. I feel nice. I sugar and spice. So nice, so nice. I got you. Bum, 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 bum. Bum. So there is no mistaking where James Brown, no mistaking his influence on music of the world. But James Brown left his stamp on American music and American culture when in 1968 he released an anthem called "I'm Black and I'm Proud." That song actually helped American Negroes to embrace their own African slave heritage, to embrace it, to not be ashamed of it. Thank Mr. James Brown for that. I feel good. I knew that I would. I feel good. I knew that I would. So good, so good. I got you. So good, so good. I got you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Paul.
Absolutely. Thank you. That I enjoyed your journey in your musical time machine through the evolution of music there. So I do have a few questions for you before you leave. Can you hear me okay?
Your voice is going in and out just a little bit.
There's a few questions before you leave. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll start off. We have Austin, who says he's also a guitarist, was watching live, and he has a couple questions. He wants to know about your guitar. What kind of acoustic are you playing on?
Oh, that's a Taylor. And which Taylor is this? This is a. This is a Taylor. Let's see. I've had it so long now I forgot the actual model of it, but it's a beaut. This is a 714 CE. It's funny they don't name them a Taylor Special or Taylor. They give them numbers. Like the classical composers, they would name their tunes. Sonata number 714. So this is a 714 CE.
He also wants to know, what are your biggest personal influences in music?
Biggest personal influences. Right now, Scott Joplin is a big personal influence. But Stevie Wonder is a huge musical influence. Blues, I'd say Albert King. I love Albert King. He's probably my favorite blues guitar player. And but I also the Beatles, to me, were a big musical influence as well. So Stevie Wonder, the Beatles, Bob Marley is another big musical influence on me. But I'm also into heavily into Mozart these days too. So.
Very eclectic mix.
Yeah.
I noticed you didn't have any Bob Marley in there.
No, see, this is American music, right? So this is the roots of black music in America. So he was, I'm grateful that Harry Belafonte went to Jamaica and came back with the influence there, But yeah, somehow I'd like to, because Mr. Marley had an incredible influence on the world, musically.
Got a question by email from Mary, who asks, what are the best cities to visit for live local music?
Well, I would say, I know that Austin, Texas, has also always been one of the best cities to visit for live music. And Nashville, I mean, means the country, the home of country music. You're gonna find some of the best players in the world down there in Nashville. But New York City is a great place to hear live music. Especially I have spent years playing on Bleecker Street, and some of the best musicians that I've ever heard anywhere were right down there on Bleecker Street. Just making a living.
So here's kind of a big one for you. Where do you think music today would even be without the influence of all the legendary black artists that you highlighted?
Wow.
Boring.
Well, wow. Would be a lot less funky. I mean, these artists, they naturally have the influence of rhythm that comes from Africa, and they would bring that into their. They would combine that with their. I mean, all of these musicians were incredibly not just gifted naturally, but very learned. Most jazz musicians grew up learning how to play by playing classical music, like Scott Joplin. So you've got that combination of the of classical learning with the roots and the rhythm, from Africa, and you put those together, and if you take those apart, I guess then you have what would be just classical. Imagine classical music, just classical music by itself. I mean, Scott Joplin's a perfect example of that. He learned how to play by studying classical music, but he brought his natural rhythmic and American wherewithal to that music to create that style of ragtime music, which is a style of music unto itself.
So other than listening to music, of course, are there any good books or documentaries you would recommend for people who want to learn more about the legacy of Black American musicians?
As I mentioned to Chris before, there was actually a TV movie that's on the National Geographic Channel. It's running these days, and it's called The Genius, about Aretha Franklin. So if you get a chance, check that out. But Netflix has wonderful biopics on Nat King Cole and Sam Cooke and other artists such as James Brown, and books I'm still looking for. I just read a wonderful book on Motown this past summer that I would recommend, but I can't think of the title off the top of my head right now.
All right, well, Mr. Karlus Trapp, I'm going to give you an opportunity to say goodbye and let the audience know where they can find you if they want to hear and learn more about you and from you.
Well, thanks so much. You can find me on Facebook, Karlus Trapp, or you can find me at my website at karlustrappmusic.com, and you can actually find my original music on iTunes. There's CDs called Wow and It's All Right, and even a song of African tunes with myself and Mr. Kahoro Kibochi. So I thank you all for being here and allowing me to be a part of your evening and sharing this show with you. Thank you so much.
We appreciate you, and thank you everyone for watching. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.